Carolina played number 10 ranked Maryland in a home matchup. And the reason I want to talk about this game because I think it represents the state that women's college basketball is currently in. And if you've heard me talk about this before, you've heard me say that this is the most talent that's ever been in women's college basketball at any point in time since its inception. And I believe that South Carolina is a prime example of that. If we remember last year, South Carolina had an extremely dominant team led by Aaliyah Boston and Bree Beal and Zaya Cook and Victoria Saxton and Letitia Mehier, all of which were drafted into the WNBA. Many thought that this would be a rebuilding year for South Carolina. However, Dawn Staley coined the phrase a renovation, not a rebuild. And we see that South Carolina is now led by Camila Cardozo, who could very well be a top 3 pick this year in the WNBA draft, or next year, sorry. Sophomore Chloe Kitts, who came in early last year as a freshman. Bree Hall, Raven Johnson, and transfer Tahina Paopao, with Ashley Watkins coming off the bench. Sanaya Fagan coming off the bench as well. And the freshman, Foot Wiley, Malaysia Foot Wiley, who has started to gain national attention based off her play against Notre Dame to start out the season. But I don't want to get too far off. This is the most talent that has been inside women's college basketball since its inception, and South Carolina is a prime example of that. However, we are still not seeing a large turnout. Yes, we're seeing a turnout if we're comparing the numbers within women's college basketball. However, we're still not seeing an increase compared to other sports in America. And the question then becomes, okay, what is it going to take for women's college basketball to start to gain and heighten and even more heightened level of notoriety, so where it can start to be compared to even men's college basketball? And the question then comes down to investments. And I will say this: women's college basketball is beginning to increase in notoriety and acclaim, and I will argue even more so than the WNBA. And people are more inclined to watch college sports than professional sports because there's a heightened level of loyalty. There's more of an emotional factor with these collegiate teams, whether it's football or basketball. And so that's why you're naturally going to get more turnout for these collegiate sports than professional sports. Look at the tailgating events. Look at how fervent the fan base is for college football compared to the NFL. I mean, look at our shows. We just on our show alone, we get such a higher turnout for college football compared to our NFL shows. And it's that because, like I said, it's because the heightened sense of loyalty, that emotional aspect, that emotional appeal that comes with college sports compared to professional sports. And the same comes for women's sports as well. Specifically women's college basketball, there's that emotional aspect as well. There's that loyalty factor. But there's always been a stronger gravitational pull towards women's college basketball compared to the WNBA. And that's why you're able to get, women's college basketball on ABC primetime slots 3 times out the week, or compared to the WNBA where they might get one ABC primetime slot throughout the week. And one thing that I talk about the WNBA is that the reason that they can't make money is because they can't get investments. Investors and TV companies, they don't want to invest in the WNBA because they're worried they might not get a return on investment. And when it comes down to it from strictly business perspective, you get paid what you're worth. You get paid what you're able to, based on the amount of money you're able to generate. That's not to say that you're not talented. That's not to say that you're not, quote unquote, deserving of the money. But if you can't generate more money, you're not going to get paid more. And that's just the business acumen of it. And so when it comes to the WNBA, if people don't want to watch the WNBA, then they're not going to make money. And it comes down to, that's what it comes down to. But when it comes to women's college basketball, we see that more people want to watch women's college basketball. So they're more willing to make investments into women's college basketball because they're starting to see that return on investment. Prime example of that is the matchup between Iowa and Virginia Tech. They played in a sold-out arena in Charlotte on a neutral site in November. 2 top 5 teams. Think about that. Virginia Tech and Iowa, both ranked in top 5. Neither of them are from North Carolina. Still managed to sell out that arena, and it wasn't on the primetime slot of ABC, but still was on the national spotlight with the game being played on ESPN 2. And if I'm not mistaken, we looked at the Nielsen rating, that game, that TV slot, that time frame ended up generating around $4 million in streams, just off that game alone. So TV companies see that, and they're more inclined to invest in women's college basketball and get them on those primetime slots. So as we start to see it grow and grow, yes, they're growing, and they're still not as big compared to the other sports in America, but the numbers are growing if we compare it to itself, and if we compare it to the WNBA. And it's a positive state for for women's college basketball. Is there still more room to grow? Yes, but at the end of the day, if people don't want to watch you play, then you're not going to generate money, and that's an unfortunate truth. And I'm saying that objectively as a student of the game, someone who loves basketball. I love watching women's college basketball. I love watching WNBA. I mean, I wouldn't be covering it if I didn't. But I understand how this business works. I understand how the media companies work. And you have to be able to generate money. And that's with storylines. And that's one thing that women's college basketball does well is storylines. Think about it. We haven't even discussed how South Carolina is the best team in women's college basketball, no question about it. The fact that they're ranked number 6 is an absurdity to me. They beat Notre Dame, a top 10 team, by 30 points. Then they turn around and beat another top 10 team in Maryland by 40 points. There's no question about it. South Carolina is the best team in women's college basketball. And when the new rankings come out for this week, they should be ranked number 1. Number 2 at the lowest. And there's no question about South Carolina came to the season with a chip on their shoulder once they saw that they were ranked number 6. And just based on what I've seen so far, I don't see any team that can compete with South Carolina. I know it's very early, only a week and a half into the season, but based on what I've seen so far, I don't see any other team that can compete with South Carolina. Not LSU, not Iowa, not Virginia Tech. Like I said, not Notre Dame, not UConn, not NC State, not Florida State, not LSU, not Indiana. I don't see any team that can compete with South Carolina based on what I've seen so far. And just coming back to this game, listen, South Carolina goes 12 deep, and people say, well, yeah, they went 12 deep because they were up by 30. No, they went 12 deep in the first half when it was a 6-7 point game. This South Carolina team is loaded. It's absolutely loaded. And now they have shooters to surround the bigs with, Cardoza and Watkins and Fagan. And we saw that Maryland tried to go zone on South Carolina, but South Carolina just shot him out. Listen, they shot 12-24 from the 3-point line. That's 50%. That's amazing. And that's not something they had last year. So they added that dimension, and it just makes them that much more of a threat and that much more formidable. But yeah, I wanted to use this segment to kind of to as a framing device for the topic of what it's going to take for women's college basketball to grow and to increase in revenue. And what's something we talked about before when it comes to media, when it comes to story, when it comes to getting more viewerships, headlines, narratives, stories. Stories build intrigue. Intrigue builds people turning in. Listen, at the end of the day, sports is all about narratives, all about storytelling, because it's entertainment. Sports is just entertainment at the end of the day. But let me know what you guys think about that in the chat room. I would love to hear all about it, guys. In our next segment, though, we are going to be discussing another top 5 matchup in women's college basketball between Iowa and Virginia Tech, and we're going to discuss what we saw about from there, and we're going to discuss whether either of these teams will legitimately have what it takes to be a Final Four team come April. So be sure to stick around for that, guys. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back.